Hi guys and welcome to Fandom Newbie. My name is Shruti and today I'm going to be recommending to you guys my top books for teenagers. Now a lot of you have been requesting me to make this video, so I thought that I should finally do it because I have a few new recommendations, whereas a few older books that I've already spoken about, but I haven't ever put them in one list together. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. Now this book follows our main character Lee, whose mother has died because of suicide. So her mother basically committed suicide. And Lee is half Taiwanese and she's half American, half white. And according to Taiwanese folklore and according to Taiwanese culture, Lee believes that her mother has turned into a bird after her death. So she leaves everything in the US and she travels to Taiwan to meet her grandparents and also to search for this bird who she believes is her mother. Now, in going back to Taiwan and spending time with her grandparents, Lee basically kind of rekindles that relationship and she forges a new relationship with her grandparents, and she also uncovers things about her family that she didn't know. Now, while this entire plot seems very simplistic, the thing about this book that is so good is that it really kind of uncovers the stigma associated with mental health within the Asian community. Now, this book, of course, is based in Taiwan and follows those societal norms, but I feel like it's so applicable to what we face in India as well, and just the entire social stigma around mental health and everything that people face if they say that they have some kind of mental health issue like anxiety, depression, etc. And I feel like it talks about these issues in such an amazing and beautiful way, and the story also is just so emotional and it's handled in such a sensitive and in such an amazing way that I feel that every teenager should read this book because it talks about these important issues. The next book that I want to talk about is Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. Basically what the Chicken Soup series is that it's books which are a compilation of short stories written by people from all over the world. I think mainly it's focused around the US, but as the series went on, they got stories from people from different parts of the world. But the thing about this is that the teenage series basically has stories of teenagers from all over the world. And I just found those stories so relatable, and I found those stories so captivating as a teenager when I used to read them. So there are many issues that these books cover. So there are teenage stories about how to handle grief. There are teenage stories about how to handle the pressure of school and studies. And then there are stories of how to handle heartbreak and how it feels to have your first crush and how it feels to have your heart broken, and so many things that teenagers experience in their growing up years. And I feel reading about other teenagers experiencing those things just makes you feel a lot less alone, and it gives you means to tackle these emotions and deal with these emotions that you're feeling in your teenage years. So yeah, I highly recommend the Chicken Soup series. The next book that I want to recommend is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Now the reason why I'm recommending this one is because I know that for a lot of teenagers, it's also kind of the time when they are just beginning their reading journey, and having an entertaining, fun book like Nimona to start your reading journey with is just awesome. So this is actually a graphic novel. It is a fantasy graphic novel and it is just so much fun to read. The other thing is that graphic novels are also the perfect place to start your reading journey because they're super duper easy to consume. And Nimona is no exception. This book basically follows three characters, these three who are on the cover. So there's Ballister Blackheart, who is a super villain. There is Golden Lion, who is supposed to be a hero. And then there is Nimona, who is Ballister Blackheart's sidekick. Now, Ballister Blackheart and Nimona want to overthrow the institution of heroes, which is kind of the institution that runs this entire fantasy empire, because the institution of heroes is doing some shady things which are not really that heroic. So these two are basically plotting to overthrow the institution of heroes, whereas Golden Lion is kind of the main hero within the institution of heroes. So it's a battle of good versus evil, and it's so much fun to read. There's so many amazing themes running through this book about revenge, about whether if a person commits bad deeds, whether they can be like redeemed, whether they can actually go on to do better things in the future. Like, there's just so many amazing themes running through this book. Plus, it's super easy to read, it's super entertaining, it's super fun. So yeah, definitely check out this book. The next book that I want to talk about is The Giver by Lois Lowry. So what this book is about is that basically it takes place in a dystopian society where the entire society is governed by this kind of law which is called sameness. That means every single person in society is exactly the same, and their past memories which would lend them any form of individuality, any form of like emotion, feeling, pain, suffering, anything like that is completely wiped out from their memories. Now, our main character in this book is a young 12-year-old boy named Jonas, who is now being tasked to be like the receiver of memories. So basically, like, memories from the past are now being given to Jonas, and he can actually see what the world was like before sameness was introduced. And in doing that, he basically just has to deal with all his conflicting emotions of what is right and what is wrong, and whether this society which is based on sameness is like good or is it bad. And like, basically he has to deal with all of those emotions. And again, the plot might seem very simplistic, but what is so good about this book is that it really talks about like humanity, and it talks about individualism, and it talks about, yes, like having like freedom of speech, having freedom of thought, having all these individualistic things, having a lot of emotions, and having a lot of feelings does cause pain and suffering, and it doesn't lead to like a utopian society, but like having those things are necessary for a society to develop, for a society to grow. And it tackles all of these issues again in such a beautiful way, and in quite an easy to read way, I would say, because like I said, this is a middle grade level book, so perfect for beginners as well. So yeah, if you're looking for one of those really nice philosophical books that doesn't really impart you philosophy in a very preachy manner but still teaches you something about humanity and about society, then definitely check out this book. The next book that I want to talk about is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I have spoken about this book multiple times on my channel, but I really think that everyone should read this book, which is why I keep recommending it. This book is a fantasy book, and it is set in the Grishaverse, which is the same universe as the Shadow and Bone series. This book basically takes place in a city called Ketterdam that is ruled by extremely corrupt politicians and by gangsters. Now, 6 members of these gangs, who are like extremely crooked, they are amazing thieves, and they are completely like misfit characters. These thieves kind of come together to pull off an impossible heist in a very like heavily guarded location in another part of the Grisha universe. So this is basically kind of like an Ocean's 11 type of book. It's like a fantasy version of Ocean's 11 where these misfits kind of come together to pull off a heist, and it is so well written. The thing about this book that I really love is just the character development that takes place in a very like short amount of time. Like, this is part of a duology, so there's this book and then there's also Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in this series. But like, in just these 2 books, characters are developed so well and they're written so well, and it's just such a treat to read. So if you're really into a well-developed fantasy with amazing characters that will make you fall in love with them, like morally grey characters who do really bad things but also they have like a heart of gold, and if you're really into reading those kind of books, then I highly recommend Six of Crows, because it is such an amazing character-driven story that is just so good. The next book that I want to recommend is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Now, I have to say that plot-wise and story-wise, this book does have some issues. Like, I feel like the plot is just not very well developed in this book, but if there is a reason to read this book, it is just to read the way John Green has spoken about mental health, and the way that he has explained how a person who is suffering from mental health issues feels. And if you just want to know how to empathize with like mental health issues that someone might be having, and if you just want to learn what it feels like when you face these issues, then definitely read this book, because the way that he has described OCD and anxiety in this book are so real, and they're so like true. Like, I don't know, I don't know, it's just like it's written with so much like empathy and accuracy, and it's just written so well and described so well. So if you really want to understand those things, then definitely check out Turtles All the Way Down. The next book that I want to recommend is Born to Be King by Deepak Thomas. Now, a lot of people ask me what is a great place to start reading fantasy for beginners, and I feel like an Indian fantasy book, especially for Indian readers, is the best place to start, and one of my favorite Indian fantasy books is this one. Born to Be King is basically set in a fictional empire, and our main character is Princess Kautilya. Now, Princess Kautilya is the only daughter of the king, and while her brothers are born with all these amazing powers that make them super strong, Kautilya isn't, and that's why she always feels very like different and weak as compared to her brothers. One day, Kautilya's father is betrayed, like her family is betrayed, and because of this, Kautilya is kind of shunned away from the empire. And she then basically has to gang up with a whole bunch of these misfit characters to kind of lead a rebellion and avenge her father. So that's what the plot is basically about. But like, what makes this fantasy book so great is like, firstly, the character of Kautilya is very endearing, and all the misfit characters who she kind of teams up with for the rebellion are also so amazingly written, and they're so endearing as well. Also, the use of like Indian mythology into this like fantasy setting is so seamlessly done, and it makes it super relatable for like Indian audiences. So like, if you want to have this Indian mythology / fantasy book combination that is really well written and super duper easy for beginners, then I highly recommend Born to Be King. The next book that I want to talk about is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is kind of like a mystery / thriller book, and it is one of the best books that I have ever read. It is so good. The way that this story is told is that a part of the story is in the form of a podcast, and the other part of the story is kind of like first-person narrative. So the story is that Sadie's little sister has been murdered, and the police don't know who the murderer is. At the same time, Sadie has kind of run away from home to catch the murderer of her little sister. So how the story is kind of structured is that we have a podcast that is kind of investigating this whole phenomenon of where Sadie has gone and what she is doing, and like trying to uncover the mystery of like where Sadie has disappeared. And then you have Sadie's story, where she is trying to find out who killed her little sister and trying to catch her sister's murderer. So there are kind of like these two storylines going on in the book, told through different narrative means, but they meld together and they flow together so seamlessly that it all in the end is like this one coherent story. And this book is just so well written. Again, there are some really important themes that are mentioned in this book, which have to deal with like sexual violence against teenagers, drug abuse, and just like so many important topics are mentioned in this book, and they are handled so well in this book and with so much sensitivity and just so much empathy. And again, it is a very powerful book that I highly recommend to everyone. Also, listen to this on audiobook if you can, because the audiobook is spectacular. The next book that I want to recommend is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I've spoken about this book also many times on my channel, and I cannot recommend it enough because this book is so good. It is one of the best coming of age stories that I have read in young adult fiction. It is so well written. Basically, this entire story is told in the form of poems, and it talks about the story of this young Dominican American teenager growing up in New York City. Her name is Xiomara Batista, and she is this rebellious, colorful, vivacious, amazing young teenager who is just grappling with like growing up and figuring out what she believes in, figuring out her identity, figuring out her sexuality, just like everything. She also grows up with a very religious mother who she doesn't really agree with, like their views don't match, and it's also about how she navigates that relationship. And it's just, again, such a well-written book, like a book that I feel really captures what teenagers feel and what teenagers go through. And it is beautifully written because, like I said, it's written in the form of poems, and there's so much emotion and so much like depth to every poem, and it's just, again, a beautiful book. So definitely check it out. Again, the audiobook version of this book is just amazing, so if you can, listen to it on audiobook. I think it's available on the Storytel app. And the last book that I want to recommend to you guys is 1984 by George Orwell. I've spoken about this book also a couple of times on my channel because I feel like this is also a very important book to read, especially for young people. This is also a dystopian book, and it is set in a society where literally everything that you do is like controlled. Like everything that you do, everything that you say is monitored and controlled, and they have so much power that they also control what you think. And it's a very creepy, it's a very creepy society to read about. And of course, the main character in this book basically starts questioning whether what the government is doing is correct, and he tries to kind of rebel against the government. So that's what this book is about. But like the main thing, like the main message of this book is just like the importance of freedom of thought, the importance of freedom of speech, the importance to question everything that like the news and media throw out there, and the importance to have your own opinions and your own thoughts and feelings about what is going on in the world. It's just about the importance of having like the freedom to think and believe, and to have the right to question people and the right to seek the truth. I think that is the most important lesson of this book. And again, it is done in such a beautiful way. This is quite a difficult book to read. It's not something that's super easy for beginners. So I would recommend this only to like kind of advanced readers because it is a little bit difficult to get through. But like if you are a seasoned reader and you want to read a book that will totally change your life and the way you view the world, then definitely check out this book. So yeah, that was my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed my recommendations. If you did, give this video a big fat thumbs up. Leave some of your recommendations down in the comments as well. I would love to know what you guys have been reading. And of course, do subscribe to my channel for more book related videos. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.